Hello, webinar attendees. I'm Marisol Morales, and I serve as the Vice President for Network Leadership with Campus Compact. We're so happy to have you with us today for our webinar series. We hope that you and your families and communities are staying healthy and taking care of each other. And instead of doing a land acknowledgement, we've actually decided to take a pause and offer opportunities for reflection. Given a call from some Indigenous scholars to rethink the way institutions are doing land acknowledgement. So I'm going to actually throw an article in the chat for folks to be able to reference as a way for us to sort of think about the land acknowledgements that we have and make sure that we are doing them not just for ways that are performative, but actually in ways that support action and justice towards our community. So I'll give you an opportunity to when you have time to take a look at that. And also I want to say we want to stand in solidarity, recognize and stand in solidarity with those individuals and communities that are continuing to call for racial justice and equitable communities and affirm that Black Lives Matter. At Campus Compact, we commit to move beyond words into programs and actions that fully embody a commitment to full participation and equity. I'm so happy to have you attend this webinar today titled Radical Imagination in Action, Revisioning and Co-creating Community Engagement. It feels about time to engage in some radical imagination, hopefully to fill our souls after so much heaviness over the past couple of years. Before I turn it over to the webinar presenters who will be introducing themselves, I just want to sort of shout out a couple of opportunities that we have. Campus Compact, we're always happy to do open houses with your institutions to share the resources that you have available as a member campus. And so you can reach out to us. I will throw my email in the chat if that's something that you're interested in. We can set up an opportunity to do an open house for your institution. In addition, our credential program, I'll throw that in the chat, and our registration for our national conference is open. So if folks are interested, we're hoping to announce our keynote speaker in the coming weeks, and I'll throw that in the chat as well. The title of our conference is A Better Way Forward, Innovation and Equity with Equity at the Center. And so looking to have a lot of really meaningful presentations and opportunities for dialogue. So at this time, I'll turn it over to our presenters who are going to share with you about their own experiences.
I guess I'm starting. So thank you all for being here. We're excited and honored to present today with thank you, Campus Compact. I'm a little nervous, as I always am. I'm Julia Vandrine. I direct our Center for Community Engagement at Dominican University of California. With service learning program is really at the nexus of the center. And I've been doing this a lot of learning for the 17 years that I have been at Dominican doing this work and also teaching in what is now our social justice major. And I will turn it over to Emily. Yeah.
Okay, I'm Emily Wu. I'm also a Dominican. I'm the Assistant Director of Service Learning Program. Handle a lot of the community partnership, relationships, thinking about new projects, ways to put our service learners in the community. Yeah, and I've been doing this work as also a social justice faculty. I started as a religion faculty. I've been doing this work since 2012, Julia, I think. Yeah, I called Julia for one of the classes I was interested in. I got stuck with this program, but it's been exciting learning all throughout the way. I'll turn this over to Jocelyn.
Yes, I'm Jocelyn Gomez. I'm the Student Initiative Manager here at the Center for Community Engagement. I just started working with Dominican a year ago, a little more than a year ago now. And currently I'm also teaching. So we all teach and work with the community and create partnerships. And so closely working with students, and particularly some of the projects that we're going to be talking about today will be something that I was focused on as well. And just as a kind of a reminder, we're going to be having a presentation today. We have slides. Some of them have a lot of information, so you can go ahead and take a screenshot of it if you feel like you want to take some time later on and read it. If we have any questions, we'll have some time at the end of our presentation, so we're just going to go through it all, and then we'll answer questions. And we may share some links on the chat, just so everyone can take a look later on.
Okay, so I'm gonna share screen, so also our faces won't look so big. We'll be on the side. Just 1 second. Okay, present. There we go. Can we all see okay? All right, so this is our presentation. Our title is Radical Imagination in Action. Yeah, and you've met us, so I'll go on to the next slide for Julia.
So I'm actually putting a fuller quote by Arundhati Roy in the chat, but I think I have to speak for myself and from my own heart in terms of the experience of going into shelter in place in March and knowing that the communities that we are very close to and were in crisis, but also knowing that we had to step back and wait. It was not the time for us to try to approach our partners, and we needed to wait. And this idea that Roy has here, the way that she frames this as this rupture, was really very much my experience, and I'm sure other people's. Yet at the same time, what brought me out of the complete panic and anxiety I was feeling was this recommitment to figuring out how we could continue to show up for the communities that honestly we love and we have learned so much from. And so, and also to commit to not returning to normal. I think that, I've been doing this for 17 years, and I get dissatisfied easily with our programming can also become status quo. Our field can become that. And I feel like what is embedded in the work that we do is a constant critical reflection and reimagining. And I definitely feel like we are on the cusp of a transformation that, being in the pandemic, also really helped push us right into. And part of this, actually, you can change to the next slide, Em. So about 5 or 6 years ago, I'm already a very non-chronological person. And after the blur of the past 2 years, I'm less chronological. So I could be a year or so off, but I had a challenge from the person who was my supervisor at the time to really have more explicit outcomes for our program. That she asked for them to be more explicitly civic learning. And one thing that had come up for us, we're going to mention a participatory action research project that we were involved with the Canal community that we'll be talking about today. And do we have to turn on the transcript?
I already did.
Okay, sorry, I saw that. So one of the things that happened when my colleague and I started to prepare for that project is she did a lit review of a lot of the literature in the community engagement field. And one thing she noticed is that it was the community partners were always centered, yet the community members and community residents weren't very explicitly centered. So it was like our community partner organizations, but what about the community members who we work with and are actually so generous also to us in so many ways, and whose lived experience and the knowledge they hold is so important. So one of the things that we were really the proudest of when we redeveloped these was the value, community, voice, and knowledge. And I think that was what we also really felt the need to continue to center more and more. And so we had this strong foundation, and also we have these long-term partnerships that are really based on mutual trust. We have the minor that's meant the community action, social change minor, and social justice major. So we have very dedicated students, and we have the programming that we can kind of scaffold and keep with them. And we also have this very diverse student body, surprisingly, for white Marin.
Okay, so next. So these are some of the projects that we started to co-create with our community partner organizations, and some before we had these relationships before the pandemic. And I think both Julia and I, and this is probably why she hired me, is that we were constantly so dissatisfied with certain things, right? And so even before the pandemic, we're starting to think about equity of access for our students to be able to participate in some of these things. We start to see that a lot of the freshmen came in and they didn't have cars, and right? So there are communities that they couldn't get to, even if they wanted to be part of the work. And so some of the things that we started doing and started thinking about really forced us to to really be creative. And when pandemic hit, we really had to be creative to make this happen. So some of the things that we started doing already were, so we had this art, community engaged art projects with an African-American community in our county. And even before the pandemic, they were, referencing on the historical archive that this organization had to create artwork that would be displayed around the community. And, our students were working with the kids in the community to co-create these art. And so as the pandemic hit, the class actually shifted completely to virtual. And so the kids and the students were meeting online to create these work. And still they were still able to do this. So, I mean, that was kind of cool, because it had been hard for our students to go to this particular neighborhood, because it's about a 15-minute drive, and with traffic it's a little bit difficult. Another project that we had was with the Vietnamese elders, and before the pandemic we were doing community gathering with them and doing some oral history collection of their migration history. And when the pandemic hit, they couldn't meet in as a community, but then the social workers and psychologists who work with them told us that these elders were really not mentally in a good place and were in isolation. And so what our students ended up doing after we listened to some of these needs is they were paired up with some of these elders virtually to practice on Zoom, so that the elders could talk to each other, but also be able to meet with their physicians and the social workers and therapists and all the other support that they need online. And so that's how we shifted. But that was also based on the fact that we had presence in the community, and the elders were comfortable with meeting with our students in person, right? And so to see another Dominican student virtually was not uncomfortable, it was okay. Leyendo Juntos was a virtual reading pod that we co-created with elementary school, and the kids, as their classes were moved virtually, they didn't have after school programs. And so this reading together pod where the kids and our students were reading in breakout rooms, and it's a lot of fun. Julia would go on just for to end her day well. They were, and that was so important to them, because the kids really didn't have much opportunities to read without their after school programs. And so this was one of those places where our students and our faculty also benefit from being in that space to be reading together with the kids. And it's really cool. The Indigenous People guest speaker series, something that we actually co-created with a museum of American Indian in Novato that's near our school, and also a church that has a parking lot that's built upon a shelman. And so this kind of a partnership was interesting, because before the pandemic, if we all were relying on physical space and in-person meetings, we wouldn't be able to bring all these people together, or the, in terms of number and the students and physical space and transportation. But now, right now with everybody more or less comfortable with the virtual meetings, we're able to bring in guest speakers to speak to and with the community members from the church, from our students, our classes, to have these discussions about land acknowledgement, about reflecting on land use, and all these really interesting conversations that we're having right now. And finally, the Spanish bilingual support is something that we started to co-create with our partners, but by really recruiting amongst our own students, the Spanish heritage Spanish speakers, to support programs in communities where the residents mostly are Spanish speakers and not English speakers. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Okay, and so part of the kind of the foundation of this work is and this is Julia's phrase, context matters. And context matters a lot in the work that we do. And in our conversations, just kind of privately, Julia's always like, why do our faculty why are they not teaching this, right? More, why are we not talking about the context more? A lot of times our students are in the community, but they're not quite sure why they're there because they don't know why and how things come to be, right? And so this level of the critical consciousness of the structural aspect of things is not always taught in classrooms, and it's not always even the consciousness of the faculty members that we have, and we found that we're always in development too with this kind of stuff. And so what I've convinced Julia is that this is actually a practice that she should share more widely, and so she's going to share with us a little bit of how she does it with her students in the class, and she's always enlightening us in how she does these things.
Sorry, that was nervous laughter. When Emily told me that I actually had a methodology, I was like, well, that sounds impressive because really, it's like, comes from the gut and from experience. So this is just super mini version, but here's Marin County in 2012, the Community Foundation there commissioned Measure of America to do a human development index in Marin, and this is what they found. We have this high index, but actually the Canal neighborhood, which is about 10 minutes from our campus in the same city of San Rafael, it's a majority Latino immigrant neighborhood in about 2 square miles, over 12,000 people live, and a lot of structural issues. So that their score on the HDI was actually 318, which shockingly is the same as West Virginia, which is the lowest in the whole country. And then in 2017, oh, you skipped one. In 2017, the Advancement Project did the race counts research and report for California, and they found, oh, here's the, I'll put the link to this report. It's pretty interesting if you're in California. Hopefully you know about it, but if you don't. So Marin County was found to be the most racially inequitable county in all of California. That is actually because, as you see from the index, that we have the resources, meaning we're high performance, except we're not using those resources to address the gaps. And so the disparities persist, even despite the fact in 2012, the Community Foundation had commissioned that report that highlighted those disparities very well. We see that the Canal community has been needs assessed, I want to say to death, but they are very vibrant and alive. But that is something that happens a lot, is external agencies for funding come in and needs assess other marginalized communities, identify the issues they're going to be addressing, and somehow they don't really get addressed. Next slide. And this is another recent report that came out of the Othering and Belonging Institute that, you know, shockingly, but not, shows that the Canal neighborhood is the most segregated community in the whole Bay Area. So this is obviously a more recent data. I think it's from about a year ago. So this shows, the first donut shows that the overall population, we're 71% white, 16% Latino, yet the second shows that 67% of the cases, the COVID cases, were Latino. So this is where I show this to my students and say, this is why context matters. This is why we have to understand the structural inequities, because somebody else is going to come in and say, oh, you know, Latinos, they don't want to social distance. Oh, well, they live in extremely crowded housing situations, because even though it's considered low-income housing, and the Canal actually has a majority of the low-income housing in Marin is actually very expensive. They're still paying $1,500 for a 1-bedroom, $2,500 for 2. So they live in very crowded housing situations. A lot of people who are able to keep their jobs were essential workers, or somebody who's living in the house was an essential worker. So you really have to understand what the structural issues are when you look at data like this, or you could come up with a whole lot of wrong reasons and assumptions for this. So yeah, as I said, it's predominantly Latino immigrant workers who actually are the backbone of the service industry in Marin, yet face high levels of food insecurity. And actually the school system in San Rafael is largely segregated and has huge equity issues. And a lot of English language learners, a lot of newcomers, and of course, a lot of students living in poverty. So that kind of leads into the next issue, that what was really coming up. So this actually Canal Alliance, which is the largest nonprofit serving the Canal neighborhood and our core partner really in the Canal, did this survey. I think, hey, I think I have a link to this survey in the notes. And so this is what they found. There's huge connectivity issues. And so the schools go into shelter in place. They hand out Chromebooks. Number one, a lot of people had never had a tablet and they didn't know it needed to be charged. So they thought it was broken. And then even once they're able to, you know, understand how to use the tablet and they're handed out Wi-Fi hotspots, then you also have the whole digital literacy issue, because people they don't have jobs where they use computers. People have already literacy issues in Spanish or in the indigenous language that they speak. So this was a huge crisis and was coming up big for us when in May and June when we started talking with our partners.
I just added that link from the previous slide. Yes, so just understanding this context. So again, the Canal neighborhood is, and within Marin County, there's big, equity gap discrepancies that are happening. And then COVID came and a lot of their life was changed and altered. And so a lot of the members that live in the Canal community, of course, are what they consider essential workers, and so they have to go to work. But of course, they have families and they have needs, and their children now have to do distance learning. And so there was that need that we needed to support the neighborhood or the community, but it has to be all virtual. So we talked to the community partners, members, students, and we began this this project, the digital literacy project, together, producing it together, designing it, planning it, evaluating it together, all together. And I believe I have more. So this graph that I have here shows a little bit of that, how we were able to co-produce this program, and we got it this right here. This link here, you give a little more information about what co-planning and co-designing is and co-production. So next slide. So digital literacy in the Canal neighborhood. So once we started talking to the community partners and members and students, we began asking different questions. But one of the questions here was, how do we create spaces and processes in and out of the classrooms that value and highlight students and community members' cultural wealth and knowledge and lived experiences? Because as we continue to work with the community members and the students, they started to make connections about the experiences that they're having with distance learning and the difficulties that COVID, kind of brought up, or the inequities that were already there, and now they're very, very visible. So the next slide, please. So we started out, so I came in a little last year around September, like in the beginning of September. So right when school already started and students were already kind of getting together in their classes. And the Center for Community Engagement has an orientation in the beginning. So they have where all the students that are enrolled in a student's service learning class attend. And so in that orientation, we were able to kind of make a call for the students who were bilingual, who spoke Spanish, because again, when we were talking to the community partners and community members, what we realized is that we really needed someone that could really communicate with community members in Spanish, in their heritage language, because there was a lot of words and just ways that we communicate that really needed to relate to the community members, that maybe some of this other Spanish that's more formal that it didn't fit. Also, because then we realized that even technology, the language with technology in Spanish was totally different than what many of us were used to. So it was a lot of learning from everyone at this point. So we wanted students who spoke Spanish, who were very comfortable communicating with members, and even if they weren't, that they were willing to learn at that time. And so in this orientation, we asked some of our student leaders to make that call and ask come join us in this project that we're building together. So this is Lady Lopez, and she is our Edge Fellow. She's one of the student leaders who have been working, who has service learning classes, and now is very active with the community in different areas. So she can explain a little bit about her activity with the community, and then you can hear her call for more students to be part of this program. So.
Hold on. Why?
Okay, my name is Lady. I am a second-year global public health major with a double minor in community action and social change, as well as Spanish. And throughout my time at Dominican, I have been partnered up with Canal Alliance, specifically with the UP program, which is a abbreviation for University Prep, working alongside middle school students from 6th through 8th grade. And I started taking a service learning class my first semester of college at Dominican, and it has been an amazing learning opportunity, not only to put into practice what I learn in class, but also have unique experiences of my own. As someone that identifies as a native Spanish speaker, it has been very rewarding to interact with parents thanking me for helping their children with schoolwork, since they don't have the knowledge to be able to help them out. I believe many of you as college students will identify with me that now more than ever, we need to contribute to the needs of minorities and people of color in the midst of what is happening around us, especially for younger students, because if we think we've had it tough dealing with changes, they have had it even more difficult on their end, which is why this semester we are mobilizing our student body and involving many of our talents and strengths to help with tech literacy program for our Spanish speaking community members. So if any student that is bilingual, fluent, or a native Spanish speaker, I encourage you to take advantage of this unique opportunity to really support our local community and empower our local youths and their parents as well, who look up to those of us in college, and serve as a bridge to these parents and youth facing difficulty with language, culture, and technology, which is a huge gap that is widening with the COVID-19 now. And we ask that.
All right. And so at this point, when Lady's making this call, the only thing we know is that we identified talking with community partners and school districts is that parents, Spanish-speaking parents, community members need help with their connecting their child to their classrooms, and then being able to see if they even did their homework, because that was the other issue. The parents can no longer see or are able to monitor their child's education because everything's virtual at this point. And so that was the initial need at the moment that we had identified. And so with that, Lady goes and asks the students for whoever wants to be part of this. That's all we know right now. Once we start actually being with the community, we have some parents coming into Zoom meetings. We then are able now to talk to the actual parents. And so it takes us a few meetings with them, but then we start to hear a little more about them. We get to know them more. So now we go from, okay, so they need support, learning how to navigate Google Classroom, to see what else they need. And so in the next slide, we have Norma. And so she is able then, she's one of the parents that was part of the program. And many of the parents then are able to communicate their own needs. So yes, a few sessions they get to practice with Google Classroom with our students all through Zoom. And phone calls, because for some parents, we realized we need a lot more support than others. Some of them were able to just pick up Zoom and Google Classroom, and it was kind of easier, but some needed more support. But then after, once they got comfortable with us and working with the students specifically, they started to tell us a little more about what they want, so what they want to see, do some Google search, find that information about tutoring. And then they also start to share their stories about them coming here as immigrants, and other stories that then we realize that are also important to understand and know, because then that also supports in this co-production of this program. And so here Norma tells us, previous to this, she tells a little bit of the experiences that she has, not being fluent in English and being, those scared, having fear about using that language with other people. But she identifies this fear as one of the reasons that parents are fearful of interacting with school districts or other officials. And so this is in Spanish, so there is some caption. Just so you know.
A nosotros como padres nos sentimos más que no podemos ayudar a nuestros hijos. Entonces yo pienso que si buscar ayuda es irnos directamente a la escuela. Yo por eso en la escuela yo veo mamás que están, es que no sé cómo ayudar a mi hijo a leer. Le digo, yo también tengo ese mismo problema. No te preocupes. Ellos, una vez que ellos agarran el inglés, ellos lo van a, porque el chiquito nos ponemos a leer y me dice, mamá, es que tú no haces comprehension, tú tienes que comprender. Y tienes que poner atención, me dice. Le digo, gracias. O palabras que no sé pronunciarlas en inglés. Cuando estoy leyendo un libro, él me dice, no te preocupes, yo te ayudo. Y dice, separa las letras y después las juntas y dice, ahora dilo tú. Y le digo, gracias, eres un buen maestro. Y eso me gusta de ellos, que siempre me están ayudando. pero yo pienso que en futuro vamos a ser más padres para ayudar a nuestros hijos a salir adelante.
Yes, and so here, again, she's explaining that even though she doesn't necessarily understand English, or she can't necessarily support her child like she would if she were to actually speak English herself more fluently, that relationship that she established with her child at least is enabling her to still be part of her his education. And so similarly, she kind of shares that with some other parents that also are expressing this fear and this frustration of not being able to help. And so how do we find ways to help, their child? And so again, once we know this and they share these experiences with us, then we are able to say, well, how about if we look online and we see these resources that are available for you? If you have a phone, we can help you with that too. Like you can find it on your phone. So then we start again implementing different ways of how we can support, again, everything virtual because we are not able to meet with them in person still. And so once we start, again, listening to all these stories, we, begin creating these different programming for the parents. Then we have a moment where we have a reflection within the students because then they themselves learn a little bit more about what they were, had their assumptions of coming into this program and what the community has to offer. So in the next slide, we have, yes. So here, this is something where we started to discuss, these are some of the only a few of the members that were working closely with me, especially in the summer. So we have a little bit of moment of reflection of what is it that they were able to understand working with the community. And so I think I'll let Patricia and Denise.
I think for me, would have to be like the fact that many times they think of Latino as people who are unable to do certain things, like learn how to use a computer or, be technological, and to go beyond just their usefulness in this country, which is mostly workers, farmers. That's what most people think of us. So I think to explore that aspect, that they are more than just that, and that they are their own individual person who are able to provide knowledge that maybe we don't know about, and that they are capable of learning the technological stuff and to give us more, like I said, knowledge that we weren't aware of. Just because the most of having gone to school or having graduated high school doesn't mean that they don't have knowledge.
Even just the program existing and the parents reaching out to other parents to tell them about this program.
Okay, so here again, Patricia is the student that first started talking about, just knowing that there's still a lot of things that we know, but in reality, we also don't know. And so we come into with the community knowing that, having that understanding, and then learning a lot more than what we initially thought. So here we're coming with digital literacy, but then we learn a lot more. And so she here, and I think the reason I included it is because I think a lot of the times as community or organizers or those who create programming, we have assumptions that we come in, and which of course we always are working on our assumptions, but that shouldn't stop us from continuing to work and learn more. And so in our next slide,
No.
I think for me,
There you go.
okay, yes. So then now then we start again to reflect. So what are our assets and what needs to change? So again, we have a lot of our community, our cultural and linguistic knowledge, and also a lot of just our lived experiences. Even though there may not be the same, we have some things that we can relate to, and we can then take from there and continue to support and continue to grow and learn ourselves. And instead of just kind of having, because sure we had an idea of what we thought supporting parents, helping them, be able to see the homework for the children in Google Classroom. That wasn't it. Like that was the beginning, but really the program needed to change and fit to what the community needed, not what we thought they needed. And so I think that's what we learned ourselves, students, and the community members as well, to just be able to trust us, and hopefully, and then we're able to expand and do more. And I think that's it for me. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So then we expanded to more of our programming again, because now we started to hear different stories. And so with the digital literacy program, we started to collect data to see what's the improvement from the beginning. Again, like I mentioned before, some of them never work with the computer, so it took us a little longer to even get them to Zoom, a few phone calls, WhatsApp, whatever it is that they have, we were going to take it and we were going to use it. And so from there, and then some of them now are more comfortable using the computer, a tablet. And so now we're able to collect data and see what that effect was and what else can we do more. But then, of course, we started doing more of the Leyendo Juntos, expanded it more now in the summer with some of the same students who already, it's one of our students, she was so involved. She was in Leyendo Juntos, she was in digital literacy, then she started doing rental assistance, and the parents already knew her, like they knew where she was, and every time their child was logging in and dialing in for Leyendo Juntos, they're like, oh, there's Daniela, and hello, and just kind of having a moment there with her. So again, that's how the connection was made, even though we never actually met in person. And then again, rental assistance and outreach, then we kind of expanded it even more, because that's another issue that we heard a lot, that some of the community members were not able to pay the rent. There was this application, there is an application online, and again, this application sometimes is not as friendly. And now it has changed to where it's a little easier to handle, but uploading documents and all that. So then we were able to again connect with our community partners and work on this program and continue to work on it.
Okay, yeah, and so from what we learned in the community, we, and as faculty in the classrooms, and the way that our service learning works is that we have these service learning designated classes where we try to connect community experience with disciplinary content. And so the way that we try to reimagine some of those things is that we want to make sure that our students also come in and make those connections a lot faster, and based on what we learned in the community, to make the community more at the center, not the content. So the content become things that we, tools, or whether it's analytical tools or skills that we could use on the ground, so that our entire work could stay as community centered as possible, with the voices and knowledge of the community members in the center as possible. And so some of the things that we started looking into as sort of across our classes, multidisciplinary offering of our classes, are some of these concepts I would try to build in, kind of like not on top of the disciplinary content, but sort of like underneath. And so we created some materials, and created some strategies that we share amongst the faculty, and then these are some of the key ones that we think were really important for us that we introduced to our students in most of our classes, so that they could, when they get into the community, they have the right mindset, they have the right connections, and they're thinking about the things that are more about the community members, and not so much about how they feel good about themselves being there. And this is Julia's slide. You're muted.
I just got to spend time with Paulo Freire with my students on Tuesday, and this is from Pedagogy of Freedom. His for me, then that also really fits with radical imagination, but the concept of unfinishedness, like we can always overcome the conditioning that limits our lives in many ways. And I used to work with a popular educator who just phrased it in the way that I put into the chat, that we need to understand our life in the context of the world in order to transform the world with the context of our lives. So identifying the structural issues that condition and oppress as well as our privileges for those of us who have them and the intersectional pieces, but being able to understand the structure, have that structural analysis is crucial.
Yeah, and another set of principles that we started to really introduce to all of our students coming into service learning are the cultural humility principles. And, you know, we started doing this for a couple of semesters, even before the pandemic hit. And then we really felt that this would be important, and us also because we're realizing that a lot of the students actually come in and exit, and they were still thinking mostly about just the first principle about lifelong learning, about the self-reflection piece, which is good, but then still, you know, going light on the power imbalances and on the institutional accountability piece. And so really wanting to drive it home, and because we had to not keep our students on Zoom for so many hours over the pandemic, we, you know, with some leftover grant money that we had elsewhere, we created these modules. And so these are self-paced modules that really introduce more concepts and a little bit more history and you know, processes and exercises. I'm thinking about biases that we have students work on as sort of, you know, sometimes, and depending on the classes, some classes integrate them as part of the coursework, some use them as sort of a side thing. But, you know, as a program, really, we're seeing that as students do these modules, and sometimes a couple times with their different classes, we're starting to see firmer foundation in the students really engaging and more concretely with these conversations that we have with the community, and really thinking about putting the community in the center. Another model that we've seen to be really helpful to not as an, you know, it's an invitation, but also to put language to what a lot of the students are already seeing, especially, you know, as we work with the Spanish it's bilingual cohort, they're really seeing this with themselves, with the community of the community cultural wealth model. And so this really gives students a language analytical tool to really think about then what they're working with, and to really put the community's knowledge in the center of things. Appreciative Inquiry is another model that we, you know, try to use, so that, again, you know, to put more language to them what the students are seeing the community. So language and experience for them to really, you know, more intentionally look for these things and make connections, but to also, again, encourage them to think about then how the community members should be placed in the center, including not just what they want now, what they think they need now, but what they aspire to be, what their dreams are, what their visions are. And to really center this as a model that we embrace. And, you know, here's a list of questions that I just worked with this with my class last night on this, to think about then how do we frame our questions or reframe our questions when we ask our community members about what's going on, you know, what we want to know. You know, if we only ask people about deficits, they will tell us only about the deficits, right? And so how do we reframe these questions so that we actually get a more balanced view? Okay, and so pedagogically as a program, these are things, and it's a lot of words, I know, but this is what we aspire to do, is to really push further on the cultural humility modules, to embrace these principles, but also always look for more concrete stuff that we could do, practices, more concrete approaches, more concrete things that we could have our students practice. And also to really, you know, in the last piece of the really centering the community voice and knowledge with actual documentation, methodological documentation of their voice and knowledge. We have oral history, we have our students do field notes, we have compilation of these oral history, we do research, you know, with this, to really let the students know that this is what really matters to the community and not just to us. Okay, so I think this is Julia's piece.
So I have to say, maybe because of or despite the pandemic, this turned out, it was the most intensive working period we've ever had. And honestly, it keeps on going but I personally just felt it was also such a completely generative time because we were learning so much. especially from this cohort of students. I had tried in the past to do some kind of co-creation with students, and it was extremely difficult. So we've really erred much more on the side of really structuring and having a lot of clarity, because ambiguity was hard to do within a class and within a semester. But what we saw in the fall with a bilingual cohort of about 30 students, I mean, just the flexibility, the generosity, the willingness to iterate, and they were constantly coming up with, okay, we're going to make videos, how-to videos in Spanish. Oh, we're going to make a website that's parent focused. And it was so inspiring. And what happened was that our other partners we started getting the call for more and more Spanish speaking students. So we started really having that explicit conversation with our partners also, and structuring out what that programming was. And one that really emerged was rental assistance, as Jocelyn mentioned. And for the first time, actually, we managed to get some money and were able to pay our students who became essential to the rental assistance that we started over the summer. And now we're really expanding that. This continuing the rental assistance, because it's so crucial, yet also we have 40 students in our cohort, and we're working with unaccompanied minors. We're working with the COVID response in the canal, with other programs. My mind is going blank. So a lot of different programs, and it's pretty amazing to see that engagement. And the other thing that came out of this was a lot of the students, the heritage Spanish speakers, were in kind of a traditional Spanish minor. And I was starting to question if that was really serving them. And even the Spanish minor was trying to move away from the one service learning class that they had. So I kind of brought forward the idea of adapting in my division, which is Division of Public Affairs. We had a Latin American history, which was a kind of traditional models and not a lot of students in it. So we're now are adapting that as a more Latina OA studies minor that will be launched next year. So all coming out of this experience. What else? And this is something I've been wanting to do since like 2012, is to really formalize, have a more structured partnership with the canal, so that beyond service learning, it's not this random, we find out what occupational therapy is doing, or psychology or whatever, just going in and doing the regular institutional, like we think we're going to teach people kids how to wash hands or whatever it is, that this is actually centering the community voice and the issues they identified. Change the slide. And on the left-hand side is the report that actually came out of the participatory action research project that I mentioned at the beginning. And this is actually now, my colleague who worked with me on that is now on sabbatical, and working with the group of some of the same community members that we work with in 2012 to 2014 around public safety, and specifically around lighting issues in the canal. And I think my last slide, and I'm rushing, is so the partnership will be centered around this vision, the Voces del Canal. Also, what happened is that the executive director, when he became executive director, Omar Carrera of Canal Alliance, who worked with us on this project when he was assistant director, he continued to try to center and keep the Voces del Canal community leaders really going and supported. But what happened with the pandemic is he really decided now is a time we need to center them and really give them the resources and the framework to be their own entity within the organization. So this is what I'm bringing to our new president, is really having a partnership that is formed around the community members' vision.
And so to wrap it up, he sort of some of our visions of how we could, try to walk the talk. And we really, we genuinely want to make this as community centered as possible. And so our commitment is to create those culture shifts. And the cultural shift, including cultivating some of these things that we talked about to center our students, and also center the community members' knowledge and lived experiences, to decolonize our own actions and to create the space to process and practice these things, right? So when we have theoretical stuff that we talk about with students, we're always thinking about then where's that space and where's that place for the students to actually practice and make connections in the community, and also to really think about equitable participation of our students, of our faculty, of the community members in the process, in the creation of these projects that we have. So yeah, this is it. Yeah, and we have 4 minutes for Q&A.
I don't think we have the full 4 minutes, but I know there's questions about the culture humility modules, Emily, and
should I stop share then? Then we could maybe take some questions.
so I put Emily's email. Emily worked with a grad student and she created those. They're amazing. And we continue to expand the repertoire, but Emily.
Yeah, and I couldn't see the chat when I was doing the screen share, so I'm sorry if I missed your question. So what's the question for?
Well, did you create them? Yes. And somebody asked if they were in Canva.
No, so the modules were actually, they're in both slides and they're in Google Forms. And currently we don't really have the capacity to take people, but if you're interested, you can email me and we could maybe talk about this, maybe share some of the resources, but it's, we share it with our community partners if they need to do training with their volunteers.
Can I offer us maybe a suggestion? Thank you so much. This was such a wonderful presentation. You had some badass slides, I just have to say, great design. But we have a campus compact affinity network and one specifically for minority serving institutions. Our next meeting is in January 12th, and maybe we can, move this conversation or continue this conversation in that space. These are the kinds of, developments, things that we're doing, particularly at MSIs, HSIs, that really find ways to support the students we have, take their community cultural wealth and have them see it as from a position of strength that really helps empower the community. So thank you all so much. We have a lot of love in the chat for the work that you have done, and, really taking a time of difficulty and creating opportunities for reimagination, making something different, that we can't go back to normal. So much love and appreciation, and we will continue the conversation. Thank you all so much. We will hopefully make the slides available to folks who registered, and this will be on our Campus Compact webpage, the video of this in a few weeks. So if you want to come back and take a look at it, you're welcome to. But sign up for those affinity networks, check those out, and the January conversation, if you all agree, can be focused on continuing the conversation of this work. Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And feel free, I put our emails are there. Feel free to reach out. I mean, we're excited about this work. So we'd be happy to talk with other people and, find out what you're doing too, especially once we get to the end of the semester. But thank you so much. I was really nervous. I mean, I always am with public speaking, but thank you for the warm reception, and we appreciate the opportunity, Marisol.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so that's it for the webinar. Thank you all for attending. Check out our website, and we'll see you next time.